Okay, so we just talked about this. How do we make HDF5 a sustainable piece of software? And we talked about it's making the code more maintainable, just so it's easier to work on, that makes it easier for people to come in, but also more community participation. So the focus of this talk is really about the HDF5 library and not the other things that we produce at the HDF group, like HSDS and things like that. It could apply to that too. But, and when I talk about community, I don't mean in the sense of like all the people here who are doing all this like really cool stuff that uses HDF5. It's about the people who develop the HDF5 software. As far as I can tell, the part of where people do stuff with HDF5 is going amazingly because everybody's doing really cool stuff with it. So what we'll talk about today is escaping the walled garden that HDF5 basically grew up with and still kind of acts like. Transparency, GitHub, documentation, trying to bring in more external contributors to the core library, communication with key downstream software like H5Py, and some challenges. So HDF5 we've always been open source, but it's also kind of been run as a walled garden, where run by a bunch of benign dictators, where there are a bunch of library developers who largely work at the HDF group, and there's just not a lot of external contributions to the library. Most of the code that is in HDF5 was written by HDF group employees. But this is not how I want to run things in the future. I want us to behave more like a real open source project where there's a lot more external contribution, a lot more external governance over it, and just a lot more help in maintaining the library. And why? Because we have limited funds at the HDF group, and many hands make light work. Also, having external people work on HDF5 means that we'll be able to better support people who are using HDF5, that we'll hear more frequently from people who are using us downstream, and that helps us model how the library behaves and where performance improvements happen and things like that. Another thing is that it helps ensure HDF5 lives on even if the HDF group closes up shop. But many people here are very worried about the long-term ability of HDF5 to meet their data needs. People here have talked about how many of their projects exist for decades, and so having one single company provide the lion's share of development for your piece of software is a risk, a project risk. So we want to help reduce that so that even if the HDF group, at some point in the future, just no longer can exist, then HDF5 still can be maintained. There's still experts out in the field, people who know how to work with it. So one of the things that I'm trying to do, I've only been the director of engineering for about 2 months now, is to try to make HDF5 development more transparent. Like I said, we've grown up in a walled garden. Things like our issues have often been in Jira, which has been behind a wall where you can't see it. For a long time, it was not even easy to see to deal with the source code because it was on a private Bitbucket server, and so we want everybody to have a good idea of what's going on with HDF5, and not only just the people who are here, people with whom we have frequent contact, but everybody, people who are just coming to HDF5 for the first time, people who have not attended an HDF user group meeting. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm trying to put the release schedule on GitHub and keep that up to date. I think that's an important thing. I'm going to try to blog more frequently so that people can see what's going on in the library with our software, with our features, with the development decisions that we make, so people understand why we're doing the things that we do. I want to make our performance metrics more public, things like the Grafana charts that I showed. I want to make those more readable. I want those to be out there so that people can see them. I want to run them on EC2 instances so they don't have all the jitter from an in-use machine. And also do website improvements and documentation. GitHub, that was a good move for the company. It was a huge success. People like us having us on there as we moved from Bitbucket. I've been trying to reduce the number of branches. Like I said, we're trying to cull a lot of the maintenance branches. It's difficult, I think, for users to figure out which version of HDF5 is the right one to use when there's 4 currently active and released maintenance branches, soon to be 5. And just too many branches in general. We had a lot of stuff that was sitting around in there. As I looked around at other open source projects, some people use branches as a scissors drawer and they just throw everything in there, and others have very limited numbers of branches. I decided to opt on limited number of branches. so that it's easier for people who are coming in to understand where their features are and where to go get stuff. We're trying to do better about going through pull requests and GitHub issues. We came from a culture where a lot of our stuff was done in Jira, and where the pull requests that we cared the most about were the ones that were created by other HDF group employees. And I'm trying to change that to where every week or every other week we go through and we try to address GitHub issues, we try to address pull requests and get that stuff in, get into the library, so that when people do make contributions, they happen quickly. And also just that I'm trying to do it, be more responsive and timely about responding to these things. Like we've had some pull requests that have sat in there for months. I think the oldest GitHub issue was created right after we started it. So GitHub issue number 1 still exists as a thing that we need to look at. So documentation. So currently there are 3 sources of reference manual entries. There's the old support site, the portal, and Doxygen. And search SEO is not helping us in many of these cases. If you go search for certain, just type in H5F create, the odds are you're going to go to, I think, usually the old support site, because that's where the most things link to, and Google's happiest to send you there. So I'm trying to reduce that. We're trying to push everything that we have into Doxygen, the reference manual, the user's guide, all the user-facing stuff, the things that you need to use HDF5. Not that the developer stuff will probably keep a little bit separate, probably in a different area on it, but I want all the user level stuff that a user needs to be in Doxygen, so it stays with the library and gets kept up to date across release branches. We're trying to add architecture documentation. That's going to take a while. It's been on our to-do list for quite some time. It's challenging. It's, like I said, we have few resources. It's challenging to find time for people to do this. But also another thing that I think is really critical and that I want to get done over the summer is better guides for getting new people up to speed. The code has a lot of HDF group isms inside it, macros that are not explained anywhere, like function enter and function leave at macros. It's all very complicated, and we really do need a guide to help people come in and start to do things in the library without having to read through a ton of header files to figure out how macros work. External contributors. I really want for there to be more people outside the company contributing to HDF5 and in bigger ways. And not just, we have some people who contribute from other companies, but these are often ex-HDF group employees who have now moved on to some other company, and they're using HDF5 there. I really want to try to bring in people from the community, people like you all here, who are interested in working on the library to help come in and make changes that push HDF5 forward. Like I said, unfortunately, the barrier to entry for this is high. It's an old piece of software. It's written in C. It has a lot of quirks that we have in our code. And so, like I said, we're trying to make library internals documentation, contributing guides, and things like that. Another thing that I want us to start doing more is having more communication with key downstream software. We've always had some communication with the H5Pi people and with the NetCDF people. And I really want to strengthen those relationships and try to have it so that there's more communication across those groups. Like people at the HDF group should know more about the H5Pi internals and be able to contribute to bug reports and to have frequent enough meetings to where H5Pi people can get answers from us on implementation issues and things like that to make H5Pi work as well as it can. So that's one of those things that I'll try to set up over the next year. So challenges. There's lots of legacy practices that we have at the HDF group. We've been around for a long time. So it's going to take some time and some effort to change that. Another problem is finding effective, inexpensive, and open tools that we can use for things. I'm not a big fan of doing code reviews on GitHub because I think that's not a great interface for inspecting a big change. It's fine for tiny things or for something that's very focused, but when you have a big, complicated feature, it's not the best interface for it. And I've looked around, and it's a lot of stuff either costs money that maybe we don't have right now, or they're not as open and for outside contributors. And also too, unifying disparate data and resources. And we have scattered documentation. Like I said, there's the 3 sources of reference manual entries. Another problem is issues. We still use Jira. We still have a ton of issues in Jira that have gone back years and years and years that were migrated from Bugzilla before I even joined the company. But then we also have these new issues that are coming from GitHub, and it's not really clear how we're going to reconcile those two because a lot of times the free option is not so great. They're improving it, but it's not as good for us as Jira. But I do want something that is visible so that people can see what is the state, like what are the outstanding bugs in the library, what should I be working on, things like that. And then challenges that are big are, I don't think that enthusiasm and cooperation are a big problem. Like it's a very helpful, collaborative, nice ecosystem. People are really, there's scientists who are trying to, and engineers who are trying to solve problems. And so it's a really good ecosystem to exist in. It's one of the things I enjoy the most about my job is the people that we meet and that we work with. But the biggest problem for us at the HDF group is just its resources. It's just its time, its personnel, all the things that I've described just now that I would really like to do that I think would really help the community. They take people, and I have features to deliver, and I have limited people to do that with. And so without resources, everything I just said is just aspirational and may not happen. So like I said, this is the same slide that I showed before. There's no pile of money for sustainable engineering. We have to find other ways of funding it. And we're trying, right? We're looking at other things. We've applied to like the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation. They support open source software. But how can you help? One is pitch in, become an external collaborator. If you're interested in working on the HDF5 library, then come talk to us. I'll be happy to use you as a guinea pig for trying out different things as we try to make our software more accessible. Talk to us, feedback, ideas. Maybe we don't have the resources, but we're always open to outside ideas. Funding, support contracts, donations, that always helps, obviously. Alerting us to funding opportunities. If you see something out there, like we just discovered the Chan Zuckerberg Foundation recently. Like one of our staff members saw it on the internet, and so we went and applied for it. And that's things like that are really helpful and really help us keep the lights on and help us make the software that you use to support your ecosystem. And also, please just be patient. We really are trying to make the software that is going to do the best job for you. That's it. Thank you. Questions?
Okay, questions. I think, Lucas, you had your hand up. Did you still have a question, or you just forgot to put it down? No, maybe he left. Any questions? No.
For the funding, I think, I mean, you saw it from my talk yesterday, there's been some European funding in European projects doing things around HDF5. Mm-hmm. And I could imagine trying to include that in future calls saying, well, we need one person to work on maintenance. Mm-hmm. But then, I mean, this person, I don't know how feasible it is that a person who's there only for 3 years can make a useful contribution or not. Yeah.
I think somebody who was going to work on HDF5 for 3 years could definitely make a useful contribution.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of my goals is to have enough documentation so that somebody can come in and get up to speed quickly. Mm-hmm. Right now it's difficult, right? I mean, people come to our company and it takes a long time for them to really become good at working inside the library because there is no internal documentation. So people kind of have to learn by playing around with code and by doing things and by experience. And there's a lot of things, like just by prioritizing the questions that are the most common, the things that trip up the most people. I've been watching for over a decade, people trip over stuff in code reviews. So I can make like a 10-page document that just really helps people get over some of these hurdles. The other thing is removing a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of architectural astronaut stuff inside the library that just impedes understanding. It just gets in the way. It doesn't look like C code. There's just macros everywhere that are confusing and don't have clear purposes. And so there's a lot of stuff that I think if we remove that and made it look more like C code and got rid of a lot of the confusing boilerplate, I think it would be easier to work on the library. I think that those combinations that in the short run with just by attacking the low-hanging fruit, that people would be able to come in and do stuff. And we could give people the things to do. If somebody were working for you and coordinating with us, we could find things for them to work on.
Okay. And I don't know if this is the case yet, but are there clear contributor rules? I mean, how do you accept contributions and so on?
I don't think we have a contributor agreement anymore. I think that it's just basically, it's a BSD licensed project, and if you give us stuff, you're saying it's yours, and you're assigning us the rights to it. So I don't think it's a problem.
Yeah, and I think in the top, exactly, yeah, in the GitHub HDF5, if you look in the top level directory, I think there's a contributing.
Yeah, so we would like
file.
add like your organization to it.
Okay,
Yeah.
But then, you know, when you have open source project, you also have people working on things which are not the core, but which are useful. So I take an example like H5 Web or H5 or that. Is it not a possibility to somehow link them more strongly with let the code be the code repositories be close together, or be you know, somehow it's accepted as a contribution and becomes part of the ecosystem? Yeah.
I mean, I think something like that could be a thing, but then I think that like if we were to say move like H5 into like our organization in GitHub, then I think that becomes an issue in terms of like partitioning out what people in the organization can touch and stuff like that. And so I'm not sure exactly how those permissions work and things like that. So I don't think that they necessarily have to kind of come under the same umbrella, unless for example, the community were faltering and we really need to do that in order to keep a piece of software alive. I don't think it's really super crucial. Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is the thing. Yeah, I think, you know, not actually that you take code ownership, but that it becomes stronger linked. That it's on the forum, that it's in a kind of contrib area, that it's not people who come there can find it very, very quickly. Yeah.
Sure, that sounds excellent. I mean, like that's something I think would help a lot of people. That there's like kind of one spot to find HDF5 stuff.
And then well, the last thing is a comment to all the audiences out there and in the room, is I don't know how many support contracts you have, but I'm a firm believer in that for open source you can have a small support contract, which if you add them up, 10 or 20 of these, they can fund one person.
Yeah, that funds a person, and that's a person that can work on stuff.
And so I was wondering, are you satisfied with the number of support contracts you have or not?
No.
So I think, you know,
20, that would be great.
I mean, I actually find it always a bit surprising that people can put the important data in something and not think of how something will actually continue living. Yeah, you know.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the problem is also, and we are working on that, is that the way support agreements are written right now, they are not necessary. So we want, I think the first thing is we want people to really see the value, whatever contractual instrument they engage with us in. And so the support agreement, you can think of it, it's like insurance. You're using it in production, you need a real time in the sense of a deadline response time. And that's what a support agreement is for. A support agreement is not for, oh, please do some development for me. That's not a support agreement. But asking us for development is a legitimate request, and right now we don't have a good tool to support that. I mean, you can have a bespoke agreement with us, and under that we can do anything, but this is one example where we want to offer a contract where you have a minimum number of hours that you commit to use it or lose it style, in the sense that if you use them, you get your however big that chunk of hours is that you commit to, and then you can add to that as much as you like. But yeah, so I think you will see also later this year more flexible or more where you think, well, a support agreement is not really something for me. I'm more interested in development, I'm more interested in something else. Then we hope to make that more attractive.
I can just encourage everyone who has something important to store in HDF5 to take a support contract. Yeah.